It's Shake Them Ropes, the premium edition. You know it's premium because I'm doing the introduction. My name is Chris Novembrino. Joining me once again is Jeff Hawkins. Hi, Jeff Hawkins.
I feel that's a burial in some ways, and I don't want it to be, because it's like, okay, run the show, and then I'll start recording, and then I'll do the intro. I don't know.
Yeah,
why
you opened yourself up to this one. But
God.
We are here today on the premium episode to take a look at the wrestling career of Andy Kaufman. Obviously, there have been a number of really good documentaries done on Andy Kaufman that look at the whole of his life, and I could recommend any number of them. But what we are doing specifically is taking a look at Andy Kaufman and Jerry Lawler's interactions in Memphis wrestling. Isn't that right, Jeff?
Yeah, what are your thoughts on Andy Kaufman? Because I know there's a bit of a generational gap between the two of us. I was 10, I think, when he died. He
was already dead when I was born. I was born in 1986.
But Taxi was still kind of in those syndicated reruns for a long time during my childhood. So I'm kind of interested in your thoughts on Andy Kaufman, especially having watched, some of these documentaries. I'm sure I've watched a few of them. Or if you watched Man on the Moon, which I can talk about a little bit about the production later. But what's your take on Andy Kaufman as a whole?
So I guess it gets into my discovery of Andy Kaufman. And my discovery of Andy Kaufman was on that very first run of Comedy Central, the really, really early format where they had Dr. Katz, professional psychiatrist, which I can't recommend enough. Great, great show. But they also used to show fairly frequently I'm From Hollywood. And I was about 9 or 10 the first time I saw I'm From Hollywood. And especially at that point, I was not someone who could understand a kayfabe documentary. So it really kind of surprised me. But the thing that I was able to put together fairly young was that Andy Kaufman was a comedian who also learned how to not like break the fourth wall, but took the conventions of professional wrestling, the kayfabe convention in particular, and was bringing that into comedy, where everything was, I think, as they put it in Man in the Moon, a happening, that he was doing these happening things, but Kaufman's comedy was more complex than that. So once I got him as more of a performance artist, which was fairly early on, I was completely enraptured. I think this guy's fucking genius.
And yeah, I won't say, well, I'll say genius, but I think a lot of the people that end up talking about him as a genius don't have, and this isn't towards you, but this is towards people like Jim Carrey, who I'm kind of hot and cold on, who really pound the genius thing. I think there's a lot that they don't get about him. You put it perfectly. He's a performance artist. He's not a comedian. In fact, I think he actually he played in comedy clubs, but I think he had a disdain, or at least had the kind of thinking where he was bored by the typical stand-up type thing, and he was just kind of trying to amuse himself.
Stand-up is but one form of a performance, right? Like, I think Tony Clifton's really helpful to understanding this, right? Like, Tony Clifton that type of performance too.
Tony Clifton is basically deconstruction of stand-up comedy, and but a lot of people focus on his trollish behavior as opposed to kind of the whimsical side of Andy Kaufman as well, because he had that. Of course, I found this interesting. It's Zamuda talking about Bob Zamuda, his friend, and usually the guy under the Tony Clifton makeup.
And also, like, just the general helper dude that Kaufman would use in a number of different contexts. Like, Kaufman would be the zany man, and Zamuda, he's like the magician's assistant for Andy Kaufman.
Yeah, and in terms of comedy history, Zamuda's very important, as he's the driving force behind something called Comic Relief, which some of you might remember from the mid to late 80s. It was all these Whoopi Goldberg, Billy Crystal, and Robin Williams hosted. It was a benefit for the homeless. big thing. But Bob Zmuda is really the brains behind that. And oddly enough, I find Whoopi Goldberg to be the closest thing to kind of Andy Kaufman that I can think of in terms of being performance artists that parlay that into a kind of mainstream comedy career, because she wasn't a stand-up. She was more of an actress that then basically did a one-woman show on HBO with all these crazy characters she used to do, and that's what parlayed her movie career into existence. And that's kind of how, basically Kaufman got Taxi because of this foreign guy doing stand-up bit that he was doing on the comedy circuit for the most part. But here's a description of the final 12 or 15 hours of Andy's show at Carnegie Hall in 1979. The first act ended with a 350-member impersonators of the Mormon Tabernacle Choir entering through the back doors and caroling down the aisles, the New York City Rockettes entering from the wings, the real Santa Claus riding through on his sleigh, and Andy's Grandma Pearl, who'd been sitting on stage on her own sofa for over 2 hours, ripping off her face to reveal that she was actually Robin Williams.
Before I said that if you're all good, we're all going to go out for milk and cookies. Well, I've hired... Okay, now you've all been very good. Really have. Okay. And I'd like to take you all out for milk and cookies now. So if you'll all please, in an orderly manner, there's 20 buses out waiting for you outside. Wait a minute, and listen to instructions. There are enough buses for everyone if the buses each make 2 trips. So everyone who gets out, go on the buses, and the buses will make... If you don't get on the first round of buses, don't worry, they will be back for you. So just wait patiently. So everybody, please go out like nice ladies and gentlemen, and go out, and the buses will be waiting for you outside. Just follow me, okay? Thank you.
Act 2, the audience of 2800 boarded a herd of buses and were driven in the rain to the New York School of Printing, where they were seated in kindergarten chairs and given milk and cookies while snake charmers and sword swallowers performed, and Andy wrestled all interested female attendees. It got close to 2 a.m., the hour where the bus company would start charging serious overtime fees, so to clear the crowd, Andy announced Act 3. The show would continue the next day at 1 p.m. on the Staten Island Ferry. Andy and Bob hadn't actually planned anything there, but just in case anyone believed them, they figured they should show up. A good idea, since when they arrived at 1:20, they found about 350 people from the night before waiting, as Zmuda puts it, quote, with smiles on their faces like little kids. Andy proceeded to buy each person a round-trip ticket and an ice cream cone, and again, to wrestle all interested female attendees.
And this is after that show, which was really designed to be his ultimate feel-good performance, sort of the magnum opus of Andy Kaufman, and you get pretty much all of Andy Kaufman's different bits, and various bits are all sort of the classic various bits, but the tail end of that show, that is Kaufman all the way. It's the idea that the stage doesn't end on the stage, that the stage is everywhere, that any place can be an event. You can make show business magic happen by just buying tickets and ice cream to the ferry.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, he did have for me, his performance art was, how can I emotionally manipulate this audience to feel the way I want them to feel and then control those feelings? Because the foreign stand-up / the Mighty Mouse lip-syncing thing that he did on Saturday Night Live was originally, okay, I want you to feel sorry for me, and then I'm going to win you over. That's why he kind of gravitated to pro wrestling for me, was the instant reaction of the audience. Now,
well, there's another wrestling convention going on there with Here I Come to Save the Day, which is the wrestling convention of making them wait.
Yeah.
Making them want to see this one particular move. And that's something you see so much of the conventions and the rules of wrestling getting ported onto his comedy, and they blend very nicely.
But what people glom onto is all the stories of him trolling people, and it's one of those things where I think the early version of the Gatsby bit that he later did on, I think he did it on Saturday Night Live, but he had a sold out audience for the Universal Amphitheater. He went out there and just started reading a book. And it took about 30 or 45 minutes before people started getting pissed off, realizing that there wasn't going to be a comedy show,
and
then
walking
walking
eventually
out.
He pulls out a record player and he sort of gets mad at the audience and says, because they start booing, he really tries to work them into a froth. This is very wrestling right here. And then once he works them into a froth, he goes, fine, I'll give you an option. You can either have me read the rest of The Great Gatsby, or we can play a record. And they all are assuming that if they play the record's going to be Mighty Mouse, Here I Come to Save the Day. And instead of it being the theme to Mighty Mouse, he puts on the record, and it's Andy Kaufman reading The Great Gatsby. Yeah. It's a long walk for the joke, but it almost doesn't work if you don't work the crowd into a froth first.
But I think live performance was more his medium. People ask why he didn't do more movies, and it was like, he did this wrestling thing during his downtime from Taxi. He was actually bored doing Taxi. At one point, I remember in the latter parts of Taxi, they made the writers, in order to keep him, they made the Latka thing a multiple personality character where he could actually, go into different personalities and then talk to Alex, the Judd Hirsch character, because he was just so tired of doing the Latka, wacky foreigner character. But at the same time, while he's doing Taxi, and during the off-season, he'd be a busboy at Jerry's Deli, which is right across from CBS Radford Studios here in Studio City. And he probably just did it just to interact with people. He loved the interaction with people, which is why he probably didn't do a lot of movies and TV otherwise. Live performance was his thing, and I could see, it says in his biography he grew up watching Buddy Rogers. I could see why he gravitated towards professional wrestling.
Yeah, I think actually at one point in one of the promos between Lawler and Kaufman, Lawler puts the perfect pin on this, which is that Andy Kaufman grew up watching wrestling. He wanted to be a wrestler, but he is not big. He is not strong. He does not have the look or the physique of a wrestler, but he's got the mouth of a wrestler. And because he's got the mouth of a wrestler, that means you could be a very effective villainous heel manager in the world of late 70s, 1980s wrestling. And I think kind of the transactional part of this relationship is that Jerry Lawler was legitimately a wrestler, but what Jerry Lawler legitimately wanted to be was like show business. He wanted to be some level of a star. And Andy Kaufman represented a pathway to legitimacy on that front, much in the same way Lawler represented a pathway to legitimacy for Andy Kaufman.
I think Lawler ultimately wanted to be some form of Walt Disney, creating these cartoons and then also doing other types of shows and producing that sort of stuff. I had a question here, and I forgot what I was going to say about, but let's get into it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, one more thing before we get into it. Have you seen I'm From Hollywood?
Yes.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on I'm From Hollywood, since we're not going to go blow by blow through that today?
I have, God, it's been so long since I saw it, and I meant to bring up, during these early days of Comedy Central was my 15 minutes of fame, so to speak, I think. I was on an episode of Short Attention Span Theater doing like a 20-second bit. I had a joke originally about, like when you got pulled over by a cop, it turned into the clock game from the old Price is Right, where you higher, lower, when they asked you your speed. It's a bad joke, but I was 18 at the time, so it's like that's a thrill of a lifetime. I'm in college and I see myself on TV real quick. But what I remember of I'm From Hollywood, man, I'm mixing it up right now that I think about with My Dinner with Blassie, or My Breakfast with Blassie, which Kaufman also did.
Yeah, right, which is sort of a send-up of My Dinner with Andre. What I remember from I'm with Hollywood, actually, a lot of it was Robin Williams. Robin Williams was very, very good at helping to sell this whole idea. Kind of the crux of this documentary is that Andy got into wrestling, and it led to the self-destruction of Andy Kaufman. He was just gone. Like the way they paint it is, it's like a mental breakdown.
I don't know. I think some people were saying, Andy, come back to us, come back. But it was too late. Fathoming why Andy wrestled is like wondering what's at the bottom of Mariana's Trench.
It's an enigma.
I really knew it was really far gone when he put me in a headlock and said goodbye.
Yeah, I remember this.
Yeah, when you're younger, when you're like 9 or 10, you're like, oh my God, what happened to Andy Kaufman? And somewhere down the line, I was like, wait a second. No, this is all part of a gimmick. And at that moment, that's when it sort of dawned like, oh.
Actually, that's the part that angers me the most about the whole Andy Kaufman mystique, is that all his friends and stuff, years later, like Zamuda, I think it was 2004, organized this big benefit that Andy Kaufman would come back. It was basically Zamuda dressed up as Tony Clifton coming in there. But it's just like everybody pulling up, oh no, Andy's still alive, and Andy, this, and Andy that. It's just like, at some point, you don't want to go total kayfabe and realize it's all, tell everybody it's all a work, but also you guys don't have to be all working it still. I think that's kind of annoyed me.
There is an overworking of the Kaufman thing, and I'm on board with that, and I definitely remember that little chapter, too, where I was like, but guys, Andy's dead. Let's just...
Yeah, Zamuda was putting in ads in papers and stuff like that. Andy Kaufman's coming back, and Kaufman's brother said, oh, no, he faked his own death. He'll, and he's definitely still alive. I'm like, guys, come on.
But at the same time, I also really, especially as we're in an era where no one really keeps kayfabe, it's really fun to see, like, deep, multi-layered kayfabe and see how that really pays off.
And he always dreamed of wrestling. And he always dreamed of wrestling. He could see himself in the ring with bulging biceps and an evil sneer, basking in the spotlight as he heard the crowds jeer. But Andy wasn't tough enough. Big time wrestling can be so rough. No, Andy wasn't tough enough, so he started wrestling women. And he always dreamed.
So let's get right into the Andy Kaufman character here in Chapter 1. So Chapter 1 begins with our opening Andy Kaufman promo. I'm going to play a little bit of it here right now so you can get a taste of him.
I've never met a woman in the ring in the 3.5 years that I've been doing this who was able to pin my shoulders to the ground. And it's embarrassing, but I'll keep doing it because they keep saying they want to try. And as long as there's women out there that want to try and humiliate themselves like that. Now, I'm not saying women are mentally inferior to men, because when it comes to things like cooking and cleaning, washing the potatoes, scrubbing the carrots, raising the babies, mopping the floors, they have it all over men. I believe that. But when it comes to the wrestling, when it comes to them getting in the wrestling ring, there's nothing up there. They're all oatmeal north of the eyebrows. They're all, we Tina for brains, you know what I mean? I will pay $1,000. I'll take on anybody who wants to come in that ring and volunteer. I don't think you can do it. You know why? Because I'm going to send you back to the kitchen where you belong. I'm going to have you scrubbing the potatoes and washing the carrots. Because that's where you belong, ladies.
This promo establishes Andy Kaufman as primarily anti-second wave feminist. There's a number of different wrinkles in this character, but obviously women should be in the kitchen. They should be scrubbing the potatoes and carrots. Now there are going to be other things that are introduced into this character that are also as important as being anti-second wave feminist. We get a little bit of the I'm from Hollywood vibe, explicitly in some cases, but Kaufman comes in with a little bit of the Northern Carpetbagger vibe as well.
This is, to me, it's weird because I think in wrestling there's a tendency where you go hard on the beat, on the absurdity, and then you eventually find the layering within that. I think this is just yes, women are inferior to men and they should be in the kitchen. And you establish that to establish this is who the character is, to get the boos, and then you start the layering after that. And I think that's the kind of the genius of this whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Chapter 1, it's just Kaufman thinks that he's better than women. Women belong in the kitchen. So Chapter 2 here, we get Andy Kaufman, and he now is doing what...
Well, let me stop you real quick.
Okay.
We should explain where we're getting these chapters from.
Absolutely, sure.
There's a 3-disc set that you could get, that you can torrent. So it's less than legal means, but we're behind the Patreon here over at Pro Wrestling Torrents Classics. It's 3 discs worth of Andy Kaufman and Jerry Lawler stuff.
It's a really fun watch. So what we're going to be doing here in this section of the show is going chapter by chapter, obviously not the menus. So if you're doing this, this is now chapter 2. So chapter 2 is Andy Kaufman wrestling different women, opening exhibition matches, and he would go all over the place and have these matches. And my understanding is a lot of them were actually like legit. They were actually shoot matches that Kaufman would win. Is that right, Jeff? Is that what your research showed up?
I'm not ready to go that far.
Okay.
I think maybe a couple of them might have been shoots, but I think for the most part...
Well, I think definitely the Foxy one is obviously a work. No, Foxy's obviously a work, but I think a number of them along the way were shoots. I don't think Susan... I think Susan's obviously a work. I think Foxy's obviously a work.
Okay, the ones in the ring, I think it might have been a shoot, but it was a work between Kaufman and the ref to count the shoulders down.
Okay.
How about
that?
that?
Yeah, I think that's also true.
It was a bit of a grift.
So
to speak. But no, Susan's a special case. I think she's actually a groundling or something. I forget. I've seen her somewhere. She's an actress. The one that he has at the mansion.
Okay. Sure. So Kaufman is having these exhibition matches, and he beats 4 women in 30 seconds each. And the whole thing that's great about this is Kaufman is beating people from the audience. And you know, we're getting Kaufman now established as this guy from the North who thinks that he's better than everyone from the South, that he's this real tough guy, but he's obviously this torpy-looking dude, and you can't have him going around beating actual wrestlers. So he's beating up people, quote-unquote, from the audience. And that sort of creates this mood in the audience that anyone could beat Kaufman, that he's not legitimate on any level because one of us can do it, and then also creating this annoyance among the crowd that Kaufman can't wrestle, so why can't one of us beat this guy? So I think what it does at this point, it really kind of establish that Kaufman as a victimizer vibe, that this is a guy who is down here tormenting this good Southern audience.
It's a tradition as old as time in professional wrestling. Can anybody come in here and beat this guy? We'll pay you this much money.
Oh man, I'd love to see this guy get his ass kicked.
Yeah, and you know, people would come in and the shooters would usually, you know, end up breaking their arm or something like that to do it. But this is a different way, and so this establishes him as a superior force. And then, you know, is the Susan video after Foxy? Because I don't want to jump ahead. Okay, so I'll wait till we get past Foxy to talk a little bit about.
It's actually bang bang here. So chapter 3, we have the match against Foxy, and this match, unlike the other enhancement matches, goes 8 minutes and 35 seconds. And after the match, Kaufman is still attacking Foxy, who he's just narrowly defeated, and Jerry Lawler gets in the ring and tosses Kaufman off of Foxy.
Yeah, Foxy, I believe, is a female wrestler in the Memphis area, or at least someone that Jerry Lawler knew. It's kind of played up in Man on the Moon with Courtney Love being the plant, and then Jerry Lawler, you know, coming out and ruining it. But yeah, this one, I loved this Foxy match. I did. I thought this was a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, it's great. She gets a lot of offense. She's really fired up. This is one of the better matches of this feud. I guess what I should say is this feud,
only matches of this feud.
Yeah, this feud's a lot of fun despite the matches. It's not like the matches are quote-unquote great wrestling, but I found this to be endlessly engaging the whole way down because of all the twists and turns.
Yeah, and especially, you know, Kaufman, you know, making fun of Foxy's weight, which of course is more, you know, cheap heat for the most part, but it also brings up the point that, yeah, you know, Kaufman may be in danger of losing it, so it brings the crowd in on that part as well.
Yeah, right, and actually it also illustrates the weight differential, makes him look a little bit more in peril, like she's got a little bit better of a chance. So that gets us to chapter 4. After the match between Foxy and Kaufman, Lawler pushes Kaufman off of Foxy. He doesn't punch him. He doesn't do anything at this point. And that's important because Lawler is now getting a deposition from Andy Kaufman and the first of many videos from Andy Kaufman. Andy Kaufman is by the pool with his attorney, played by Bob Zmuda. And whenever you see Zmuda, that's kind of the closest thing you get to Andy Kaufman winking, because he could have, brought someone else in who was not Bob Zmuda, but using Zmuda kind of lets you know that everyone's in on the con here. Zmuda's really good in this, too.
Well, Mr. Kaufman, the bottom line is this. The law is the law. Assault and battery is assault and battery. It does not matter if this man attacked you viciously on the street of New York City or in L.A. Well, it wouldn't happen in Los Angeles here. But in the South, if you were attacked on the street or if you were attacked in a wrestling ring, you did not sign any contract that you were going to wrestle that man that evening.
That's right.
He jumped in the ring. He hit you. It's just as much if a spectator jumped in that ring and hit you over the head, like this man clubbed you. I saw the tape.
Tell me, do I have a case?
Do
I have a case, Mr. Zmuda?
You have a perfect case.
Okay, if I sue him, will I win?
Yes, you will, sir.
Okay. Will he ever eat again?
If somebody gives him a handout.
Well, Mr. Lawler, I hope you have a lot of friends that'll give you handouts, because when I'm through with you, you won't be able to eat again.
I love Zmuda when he's a straight man, but I'm watching this and he goes, oh yeah, you'll definitely win your case. I'm like, no attorney would ever say that to a client. Oh yeah, you'll definitely win.
Lawler, at this point, puts a point on what is motivating Andy Kaufman. As we talked about earlier, he sort of says, and this is the truth that is worked into the kayfabe, that Andy Kaufman watched wrestling his whole life, wanted to be a wrestler, was not given a wrestler's body, and found his way into show business. But now that he's made his money in show business, really would like to be a wrestler and really would like to be doing the thing that he thinks real men do, which is wrestling. And along the way here, we get a number of really great Jerry Lawler promos. And for those who aren't familiar with Jerry Lawler as a talker, this DVD collection is a really nice introduction to some of his good work.
Yeah, I'm actually interested. I did not find anything in my research on this, but I'm wondering why he picked Memphis. I'm wondering if he actually went to like Vince Sr. / Jr. and said, you know what, let's do this, and they said no, or if he went to Georgia and asked, or anything, or if he just went to Memphis thinking that they'd be the ones most amiable to doing this kind of thing.
Yeah, I would love to know more about why Memphis. That is a really interesting, lingering question. And from all the stuff I've ever seen with King, he always talks about hitting it off with Kaufman, but he never actually talks about, like, the link up between the two and, like, what motivated Kaufman to seek out Memphis of all of them. Maybe Memphis is the one that he watched. Maybe it's just that simple.
Well, it might be that, because I think Buddy Rogers was from around that area, but also I think it might also just be the southern aspect of it. He wanted to target that kind of thing because that'd be the easiest way to get heat, as opposed to like a more sophisticated New York audience that really liked him as a comedian.
Yeah, that's also a part of it. Maybe it would allow him, maybe in his mind, he could kind of work a territory and be in Bizarro land. And actually, I think, a little bit to that is the way that he uses Letterman. Like, when he's on Letterman, which is in Chapter 5 now, there's a bunch of these Letterman spots. We have the ones on the DVD here, but for those interested, you can actually watch like a super reel of pretty much all of Andy's appearances on Letterman, and you can see a lot of Andy Kaufman working as the heel wrestling Andy Kaufman character, but, and I don't know if you noticed this, Jeff, I noticed that Kaufman modulates the heel Andy Kaufman character when he's on Letterman. He's like 25 to 50% the character that he is when he's on Memphis Wrestling, but he's still very much staying consistent to that Memphis Wrestling heel that he is.
Tell me about your upcoming wrestling extravaganza.
On Monday, April 5th, that's this coming Monday, for the first time in my career, I'll be wrestling a man. And
quite a milestone, Andy.
He is a professional wrestler, and he holds the Southern Heavyweight title, and he's about 260 pounds. His name is Jerry Lawler. Mm-hmm. The way this came about was I was wrestling a woman down in Memphis in the Mid-South Coliseum, and Jerry Lawler was training this woman for about a month, and after the match was over, he came in the ring and started pushing me around.
as a result, I got mad and threatened to sue him and all this kind of stuff. And I was just trying to get him mad, but what I didn't know is he doesn't have a sense of humor, so he really did get mad.
Yeah.
And he challenged me to a match.
Well, he's actor Andy Kaufman on here, and you can tell that he's kind of, this is where he's playing the comedian / troll / performance artist Andy Kaufman, as opposed to the wrestling guy Andy Kaufman here, because he'll do things. He'll play it a little bit more straight at first, and he'll keep upping the stakes of the scene as it goes along when he's on with Lawler on Letterman.
Yeah, and when he's just on with Letterman, what Kaufman is doing, rather than getting very angry at Dave, because going full angry at Dave and frothing and yelling and doing the obscenities, it doesn't work with just Dave. So when it's just Dave, what Kaufman is doing is playing up a bit of a deluded and spacey idiot. He's not sympathetic. But
no.
you almost kind of feel bad for him because he's so clueless.
You know what it is?
Back there and talking about kicking Lawler's ass and how he's going to be able to beat him because he's been training really hard. Dave's like, oh okay.
It's a weird method acting type of deconstruction where it's like, I'm an actor and I want to do this professional wrestling thing, so I started wrestling people, and now I think I'm ready for Jerry Lawler. It's like you do, like, oh man, I'm gonna be playing this kind of character in a movie, so I decided to do this research and really, I'm gonna play a doctor. So I followed a bunch of doctors on their surgical rounds, and you know what? Tomorrow I'm gonna be taking out somebody's kidney. it's kind of like that. Now within here, I believe they also played the Susan video on his first appearance on Letterman, right?
Yes. And Letterman was very willing to help weave all of the promotions for Andy Kaufman's appearances in Memphis onto his show. I think Letterman's actually a fan of wrestling.
He was in Indiana. He was a big fan of Bobby Heenan and I believe the crippler Ray Stevens as well. So he kind of got that Midwest type of thing. He kind of lost interest in it after a while because, he's just so sardonic and sarcastic. He's just, I can't put up with this hokey crap anymore. But the thing to me was when you watch the video, the Susan video, which is he brings a overweight, I believe she's a comedic actress, and she's
bills her as being 300 pounds.
Bills her as being 300 pounds. When you watch it without the Letterman audience, it comes off so much more differently than when you hear.
It comes off really dark. It's really strange
Yes.
with like the sizzle reel, because when he's doing it without like any of the laughter, any of that spicing up, it always, and that's the first time I saw it, was without that. It comes off as dark, kind of fucked up, like he's really kind of losing his mind a bit because he's beating up a woman, and like when he's on there, he's like, oh yeah, baby, oh yeah, like it's uncomfortable.
Come on, baby! That's what's just gonna happen to you, Lawler! See? Come on, baby!
Hitting her head.
Come on!
Hitting her head. Andy, I think you really hurt her.
Doesn't matter. She doesn't have any money. She's poor. She can't sue me.
See, I can do anything I want!
Get the camera
Come
off.
on!
Shut this kid off.
See? Come on!
It's like, he's wrestling her, and then he starts to get sadistic on her.
Yeah.
It's that turn. And then when you play it in front of that New York crowd, that supposedly sophisticated, erudite, into the anti-comedy of Lawler type thing, they're watching it and they're howling with laughter at him abusing this woman, and you're like, well, no wonder he couldn't do this in the WWF or WWF at the time, because they would have just looked at what he was doing and laugh at it as opposed to buy into it as being somewhat real.
What Kaufman's doing doesn't work if there's not some level of moral outrage to him doing it.
Yeah, if you think it's all a work, if you're watching it like Andy Warhol did that first Saturday night's main event or whatever that he was at, or WrestleMania that he was on, he's like, oh, this is brilliant performance art, kind of thing. And you're just like, if you don't have that crowd, the kind of the old Southern crowds that people describe, the kind that were bringing like knives to try and stab the heel type of heat, then this kind of thing will never work.
Yeah, no, the audience is super important. So then we get Chapter 6, and it's Kaufman versus Lawler, round 1. Now Bob Zmuda is out as the ring manager to Andy Kaufman, And this match, like most of Andy Kaufman's matches, are all Andy Kaufman stalling. And it does start to lose the crowd. They become impatient about 3 minutes in. And it's not angry or impatient. It's more quiet impatience. Lawler grabs the microphone, gets the crowd back, and he offers Andy Kaufman a free headlock. Andy, you can get a free headlock on me. If you watch Man on the Moon, they do this scene. They actually remade this scene with like several chapters of this feud kind of ported into one big scene built around this particular chapter.
And with Jim Ross doing Lance Russell, and he's not a good substitute in my opinion.
No. Lance is it's a big difference.
Lance plays it so straight and so aw shucks your uncle. I mean, like I've said before on Shake Them Roughs, two of my favorites. I love Lance Russell and I love Bob Caudle because they're like your uncles who are just like, oh, come on, why do you have to do something like that every time they want to shame you, as opposed to having that loud bombastic type of outrage that Jim Ross does. But I loved the pacing of this first one where they do lose the crowd, almost as if they're daring the crowd to turn off of the entire bit just to bring them back in, because it makes Lawler's angry promo that much more rich when the audience has tuned out of this thing because, oh man, Kaufman's not really going to fight him. He's doing Zbyszko up to a 11 or 12 level in terms of stalling and whatnot. And it also makes the outrage of, because the pile driver had been outlawed. It makes it that much more impactful when he does it. I'll
tell you, the big back body drop is impactful in and of itself, in no small part because like Andy really takes that on his head and shoulders. Like he folds hard on that, and then he gets the pile driver. Kaufman is protected on the pile driver. Lawler delivers it safe and sound, and then we get Kaufman stretchered out, which I'm sure was this boy's dream. He loved every minute of getting stretchered out of that arena.
Yeah, I believe this was how he was written off to go back to. I believe he had just gotten Taxi at this point. I might be wrong on the timeline there, but this is how he gets.
I think that's right.
This is how he gets written out of the territory, because back then a pile driver, the most devastating move in professional wrestling, would knock you out for 3 months.
This is what made the Kaufman-Lawler feud so good. Kaufman was not trying to get over. He was really like business first on this stuff. So he always made Jerry look really strong. At Chapter 7, he comes out. He announces that he's leaving Memphis. He's never going to return again, to uproarious cheers and applause with his neck brace on. And then after that, he goes, "I shall return," and walks off.
I love these promos. I love these kinds of promos where people, like, I think one of my other favorite ones of this kind was when Batista did it before leaving the WWE. Where he's I quit. I love whiny heel. I'm never returning to this place again, and you're going to miss me when I'm gone. And it's really to underline the fact that, I'm coming back at some point. But I absolutely love these.
So it gives us just enough time for us in the audience to forget about Andy Kaufman. And Lawler moves on to his next feud. And he is wrestling against Nick Bockwinkel in a little cameo appearance of my man Nick Bockwinkel.
They bring in everybody into these feuds, and I didn't realize how long the Kaufman-Lawler feud lasted, but it was, 2 or 3 years?
Yeah, it wraps around.
Because you have cameos from Bockwinkel coming in from the AWA, you have Jesse Ventura at some point coming in for the TV belt, or the Southern belt. I forget which one they had. Lawler had
It's the Southern Heavyweight Champion. Yeah. I feel like Lawler loses the Southern Heavyweight Championship a couple of times.
And then to me, this is when the angle really takes off, because Jimmy Hart Jimmy Hart and a cast of thousands, almost literally, from the First Family, because I think everybody at some point was a member of the First Family at one time.
Yeah, Jimmy Hart and the whole family, as it were.
But this is when it takes off. I think Jimmy Hart had been hit by a flash paper fireball, which was a favorite in Memphis, and that's why he was supposed to have the bandages on his face. And so there's a guy with bandages down there seconding Nick Bockwinkel, and it's supposed to be Jimmy Hart has brought in Nick Bockwinkel to take out Lawler.
Jimmy Hart is distracting the referee while Jerry Lawler has the visual pin on Nick Bockwinkel. But Nick Bockwinkel, after the ref is undistracted, is able to win the Southern Heavyweight Championship with a dirty roll-up. And then we get a first of many Kaufman reveals that the person we thought was Jimmy Hart is in fact not Jimmy Hart at all. It's Andy Kaufman, master of disguise, which is, Andy in disguise is a lot of fun because this is obviously a big part of what Andy Kaufman liked to do with making things performance art. Disguise was important. That's where Tony Clifton comes in. So it makes a lot of sense that you'd see Andy in disguise ported into his wrestling world. And we now find out that Andy Kaufman has made an alliance with Jimmy Hart. This is, as you were saying, Jeff, a great plot pivot. The first chapter, those first 6 or 7 notes, those were all self-contained. If that had been the end of the angle, that would have been fine. But Jimmy Hart is what allows this to have life for 2 to 3 years very easily.
Oh, if you have never seen Jimmy Hart in Memphis, you need to go out and see it, because this is when he is great. This is why people think he's a Hall of Famer. The WWE stuff is okay. The WCW stuff is garbage. Jimmy Hart in Memphis is one of the best heel managers, Weasley heel managers ever. And to me, in terms of this bit, I could just see Kaufman coming into the arena backstage and working the boys with the bandages on already, kind of like you hear the stories of you remember the Eric Bischoff playing the minister during the Chuck and Billy marriage,
yes,
and how he was in it all day and nobody quote unquote knew who it was. I could see Andy Kaufman doing that with these kinds of gimmicks.
And I bet you that's part of the way he engendered fondness with the boys backstage, is that they saw that this guy was a worker and he was willing to go to that level to do the work.
Then, I'm looking at your notes. There's like cameo from super young Bobby Eaton. We had Bobby Eaton. We had Sweet Brown Sugar, a.k.a. Coco Beware, who's one of my favorites.
Babyface Sweet Stan Lane.
Yeah, this is the fabulous ones. Him and Steve Kern, who would become Skinner later in the WWF.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll talk more about the cameos we get from the family, because we have a lot of them here. Maybe I'll rant off some of them now. Buddy Landell.
Yeah, Buddy Landell. One of the better matches on this DVD too.
And then, in addition to Eaton and Coco Ware being a tag team under the First Family banner, also Dennis Condrey and Norvell Austin, the original Midnight Express, as a tag team under Jimmy Hart. And Jim Cornette even makes an appearance at some point, being Jimmy Hart's second. I'm just like, holy crap, man. Everybody was a part of this First Family.
Yeah, right. At one point, the First Family has a party, and they just take over your television screen.
There's like 20 dudes
a whole hell of
a,
there's a lot of people in the friggin' First Family. They're like like the Dungeon of Doom, but that's yet another thing that Jimmy
I'd say
Hart
more
managed.
Devastation Incorporated.
Yeah, well, I was trying to think of a superhero faction where you have a whole bunch of like mid-level goons.
Oh, the Legion of Doom.
We get a post-match interview with just a disgusted Lance Russell. He just wants good, clean wrestling, Jeff. with Andy Kaufman and Jimmy Hart, who feel totally heel justified and explain their heely justifications for why they're doing this. Kaufman's upset that Lawler put him in a neck brace. He crossed the line there. Jimmy Hart's upset that he got hit with the flash paper. And now Kaufman announces a $5,000 bounty on Jerry Lawler.
Andy Kaufman and Jimmy Hart. I just love that inflection in Lance's voice whenever he brings him up. That kind of that dripping with disgust type of thing. It's one of my favorite things in wrestling. Is Lance Russell's scolding. Oh, he's so great.
Chapter 9, there's not a whole lot to talk about, but I want to just say this was really nicely edited. If you're looking for some old school wrestling recap angle, like videos, Chapter 9 in this, that's what it is. It just takes us up through now. Lance Russell is doing voiceover throughout this. The way it is edited feels like a sporting thing. It does a nice job resetting everything that we've seen through here in about 10 minutes. I don't have anything more to add on that.
No, it's exactly how you said. It's a nice, kind of straight and to the point recap of the entire angle up until that point. Yeah, and then we get into the classic David Letterman show.
Yes. So after the first chapter of this feud, not the first little segment, but like after Kaufman takes the pile driver from Lawler, now that he's doing appearances on Letterman, and during these appearances, he's sort of trying to say that he's learned his lesson and that he's a changed man, and he's working a bit of the angle on Letterman's show, and Lawler comes on, and this is supposed to be Andy apologizes to Lawler on Dave's show, except that Andy is still being a heel and continues to insult Jerry Lawler, and Jerry Lawler starts barking back at Andy Kaufman, and eventually Jerry Lawler gets up and slaps Andy Kaufman in the face. And Andy Kaufman goes into his heel apoplexy and starts losing it on Jerry Lawler, and to really sell the bit, rattles off a string of obscenities, which is so wildly out of character for who Andy Kaufman regularly was. It's how you know he was working. But I thought it was funny that he was willing to go that far on network television out of character for himself.
Have you seen the uncensored version of this?
No, I don't know that I ever have. Actually, I think I have, but I not in a while. Not
it's
like for
disturbing how dirty he gets. Because it's to the point where if he had done it even today, there'd be some FCC fines coming down. I mean, there are MFers and S-bombs. I mean, it's not just swearing. It's over-the-top obscenities, which not only helps sell it as real, but it's very... I mean, for 1983 or 84, whenever this was...
Oh, yeah, if you heard a motherfucker on national television, everyone would be talking about it.
Find the audio of this if you can, since we're behind the Patreon while we can put that on.
But well, no, I didn't, because I'm not that kind of a guy.
Yeah. You know what...
what kind of a guy are you?
No. You're not the kind of guy you're...
I'll just be over here. We're going to pause here for station identification and get the hoses out here. Is Andy, are you coming in here again, or...?
I am sick of this bullshit. You are full of bullshit, my friend. I will sue you for everything you have. I will sue your ass. You're a motherfucking asshole. As far as I'm concerned, you hear me? A fucking asshole. Fuck you. I will get you for this. I am sorry to use those words on television. I apologize to all my fans. I'm sorry. But you're a fucking asshole. A fucking asshole. You hear me? A fucking asshole.
I think you can use some of those words on TV. I'm not. But what you can't do is throw coffee. I've said it over and over again. Well, that about wraps this segment up. I want to thank my guests, Mr. Lawler. Jerry, thank you very much for being here, and good luck to you, sir. And my thanks to Andy Kaufman.
But I mean, I watched it. It's like whenever you watched a movie on TBS, and then you watched the real version of it, and it's not edited, and you're like, man, I didn't realize it was this dirty.
Or even better, you've been running like if you were actually someone who would videotape stuff and you were able to catch this on VHS cassette, now all of a sudden this is like a little gem. There's a gem of video right here on this VHS of Andy Kaufman live saying something obscene. And that's how we have this on YouTube today. It's that kind of gem.
This was actually the first time I had seen it uncensored, and I was taken aback by how many obscenities he put into such a short time here.
Yeah, no, it's very quick in that he tosses Letterman's drink on to Jerry Lawler, which I think is funny. in no small part because neither of them drank. So if you don't drink, as someone who doesn't drink, the smell of alcohol, especially if you like used to drink and don't, it's grody at that point. So I appreciated the commitment to that.
I'm drinking right now, so.
Hey, that's fine. That's fine. It's just
it's beer o'clock here. Thank you.
That's okay. It's actually not bong o'clock for once. In the booth here. I'll have to address it at some other point here. So in chapter 10, Lance tells us that a match has been made between Kaufman and Lawler, and it's going to be a handicap tag match, the first of many. So it's going to be Jimmy Hart and Andy Kaufman versus Jerry Lawler, and Kaufman does a promo. It's okay, and it sort of reasserts the character fundamentals that Andy Kaufman's anti-second wave feminist, does not like the South, is a Hollywood northern elitist, and has a revenge-based alliance with Hart. Like, we get all four of those beats in this promo, and then Lance has a great reaction to it. Not a whole lot to that, and that builds up.
What's Lance's reaction? I forget this one.
I don't remember. I just wrote Lance has a great reaction. I think it was. You know what it was? I think it is. That dude is weird. I think that's where he said that.
Yeah,
one.
This is mostly Andy. I'm from Memphis, Tennessee. Memphis,
is that
Tennessee.
how you talk down there in Memphis?
Is that how you talk? You gotta go down to the farm and do the thing and do the. We can all do that. It's kind of weird.
yeah, right. No, I mean we all those promos are effective, right? I mean the fact that it's simple and you go, oh, it's just an easy button to push.
You guys are hillbillies. Hey, we're not hillbillies. Don't talk about us.
Yeah. What do you know? You think we're hillbillies? There's one part where, actually, we'll get to that chapter because I like.
You
that
guys
chapter.
are stupid and easily worked. How dare you say that?
No, we're not. You're a dummy. I hate you. So, chapter 11, we get Jerry Lawler versus Andy Kaufman. I said it's Jimmy Hart. It's not Jimmy Hart. It's actually the Colossus of Death. Jeff, thoughts about the Colossus?
Duke Myers, old school guy. I had not seen a lot of him up until this. Basically, it's another great trope of especially
He's
Memphis.
The Mummy.
Memphis and other territorial wrestling. We're gonna get a big guy in a mask or in a costume,
and he's gonna lumber menacingly.
And he's gonna lumber. Yeah.
He's a big lumbering mummy. Is what he is. Okay idea. This is very Superman. Is sort of the thing I was thinking of. Like Jerry Lawler liked to book himself like Superman, where he overcomes like the giant monster of the week sort of thing.
Yeah, and the villains would be mostly, it would mostly be the scheming arch nemesis, which in this case is Jimmy Hart.
Jimmy Hart and Kaufman.
And they would bring in. Here's our henchman who's going to finally defeat Superman so that we can actually run things. Let's see. Smoky Mountain did this once with a guy by the name of Prince Karras, which is one of the most fantastic debuts you'll ever see because Daryl Van Horn, who is the sinister minister Jim Mitchell, is doing nothing but just saying dirty jokes the entire time. It's another trope of territory wrestling. Another one we'll get into when we introduce the... what's the Confederates guy's name?
Oh, the Rebel.
The Rebel.
Oh, boy. Rebel.
I'll talk a little bit about that in many ways in a bit. But, yeah, no, this is just, we're going to find a big guy. We're going to put him underneath a mask. In this case, a very old, wily veteran who knows what he's doing. And he's going to put on a show. But basically, Jerry Lawler has to get through this guy to get to Hart and Kaufman.
So... this works, right? Like we're saying that this is predictable. This is not great wrestling.
Predictable doesn't mean bad. Predictable just means it's a good story.
Yeah, right. So the crowd goes nuts when Lawler is finally able to get the Colossus to go down, and the Colossus going down looks like a giant robot man falling over. However, Lawler misses the big fist drop, which allows the Colossus to regain control to the point where Andy Kaufman feels comfortable tagging in. And the Colossus holds up Jerry Lawler so that Andy Kaufman can finally hit Jerry Lawler, because Kaufman, of course, too torpy to do it on his own. Kaufman goes off the ropes for a running knee, but hits the Colossus, and the Colossus ends up tied up in the ropes. And now Kaufman is isolated with Lawler, and the crowd goes crazy. And I want to stop on this beat for a moment, because this little beat right here, where the Colossus is tied up, Kaufman is finally alone with Lawler. This is what that type of wrestling really thrived on. It's what you're trying to build to. This moment of fleeting justice, where everything is right in the world, but just briefly. And during this little moment where all is right in the world, Andy Kaufman gets suplexed, he gets body slammed, but then the Colossus gets free right before the pile driver.
Yeah, it's the anticipation of, okay, Lawler has to fight this big thing to get to Kaufman. He finally gets the upper hand. Will he be able to get all that damage in and beat the crap out of Andy Kaufman before the Colossus can get free? I love this staple of wrestling.
Yeah, it makes every second matter, because the thing that's a question in your mind is not, can Jerry Lawler beat Andy Kaufman? It's that there are going to be oil slicks and banana peels and green shells shot in Jerry's direction as he's making his way down the path, and will Jerry be able to get past all of them?
The thing that's great about this entire angle is that Jerry Lawler loses this match, or loses every match in this feud, it seems, because he's trying to exact so much damage on it, he can't help but do the pile driver, which gets him disqualified.
Yeah, it's a great way to keep this going, too. I kind of left off the fact that the important thing when Andy gets stretchered out of that first match is that Andy Kaufman gets the win over Jerry Lawler, which is something he likes to lord over Jerry Lawler. Anytime Andy gets a win in any way, shape, or form, Andy makes sure that it matters, which is super important in this chicken shit heel gimmick.
They try to do this in WWE all the time, and it doesn't work because they just overdo it. The whole story of, yeah, you beat the crap out of me, but technically it goes down as a W in the win-loss column.
Yeah, it's not nearly as effective as the way Andy Kaufman uses it.
No, not at all.
And one thing that's very effective here, too, is that Lance Russell on commentary is always making sure to shade what we need to be caring about. And Lance, during this, tells us that the chase remains finally seeing Andy get his. It doesn't matter that the Colossus took the pile driver at 20:04 in this match. What we want to see, what we, the audience, want to see, is Andy finally get his ass kicked.
Jerry Lawler finally exacting some revenge on Andy Kaufman.
Chapter 12 opens up with a great Lance, yeah, boy, I'll tell you.
I'll tell you what.
I'll tell you what. Yeah, I'm into it as a Hank Hill fan. And we get the post-match of the Colossus of Death and Kaufman with Jimmy Hart and Andy Kaufman backstage. Andy Kaufman has wadded up cotton and put it into his mouth, and so he is now talking like Tony Clifton, which is a lot of fun. This is just a very, very fun promo.
Is this one where there starts to be the strains on the Hart-Lawler relationship? Like Jimmy Hart is really kind of toying it up, like we'll get him next time?
No, they're in love with each other now.
Okay.
Right now this is love. This is love.
It all kind of runs together when you watch it like 9 hours in a row.
That's why I had to start taking notes and chapter it out like this, because otherwise a lot of these beats would have gotten blurred together and ended up like Man in the Moon.
I really like the interaction between Hart and Kaufman. I do. I think they have.
It's so fun.
It's like taking Glee. It's like when the bad guys win that first battle and they're celebrating and stuff like that. It's such a weird, cool little fun dynamic, and that'll only be heightened when they have the actual big celebration with the family. But I love heels celebrating their heelishness. There's something just pure about that, and you don't get that as much anymore in wrestling.
Yeah, and I like Andy Kaufman as like kind of a storm system that passes through Memphis. That he's always overhead. He's always got some sort of engagement with Jimmy Hart and the First Family. And anytime Jimmy's doing anything with Andy Kaufman around, even not around, you have to wonder if it means Andy Kaufman is involved.
You never know when Kaufman's going to come back, even though it's probably going to be during the off-season of Taxi. But it's a little bit like, this is a bad comparison in many ways, but it's a little bit like when Abdullah the Butcher would come into a territory. You know he's only going to be in there for a short time, but you know while he's in there, someone's getting their ass beat. And that's, Kaufman, the specter of Kaufman is always, he's always lurking somewhere, and when he comes back, it's going to be chaos for Lawler.
So, Chapter 13. Things get Confederate as fuck in this episode of Memphis Wrestling. Like, distractingly so. If you're someone who is like, whoa, that's a lot of Confederate flags, and you say that when there's like one or two, well, this chapter of the DVD is going to be a lot.
He's a heel in this one, so I mean, usually
is the Rebel a heel? Oh yeah, I guess the Rebel is a heel.
because he's working for the family, as opposed to all those Confederate baby faces of the South of the early to mid '80s that you got during other wrestling. Yeah, no, that in this case it's Plowboy Frazier, who, again, we've brought up this trope before, is your guy in t-shirt and overalls and bare feet.
Yep.
Turned into a different character. Which it's just like, this never... And then this Man Mountain Link. Oh, Rick Link. You know what? Part of me hates this kind of character, and yet part of me loves it. He's going in the audience, scaring children. He's eating raw chicken.
Oh, my God.
Dude. Part of me just loves it.
He's eating raw chicken, is he?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Like, I was like watching that. I'm like, you keep putting that raw chicken in your mouth, and I'm like, never want to eat a chicken again after watching this. Oh my God.
Yeah, and then of course, because it's the '80s, we have to get a phone call on the air, and the technology just stinks.
yeah, the technology stinks. I kind of like it in terms of mood setting, but they hang on some of these phoners a little too long. And basically, the premise of this phoner is that it's great that Man Mountain Link has won the Southern Heavyweight Championship from Jerry Lawler, but Kaufman says to Link, that's cool, but I'm only going to pay the $5,000 if Link puts Lawler in the hospital. And then Kaufman says at the tail end of this that he's going to purchase Graceland and turn it into a museum to him, which even catches Jimmy. Like, it's one of the few random lines that Kaufman rattles off. Like, Jimmy's like, wait, I don't even know how to bounce off of this.
Is this the one where they're complaining about, or where Kaufman or Jimmy Hart's complaining that this is going to be a collect call charged to him?
I don't know.
And that the station, I think this is the one. I think it's this first one where he's like, Kaufman called him collect, and I have to take the charges. That's such another great little minor heel move, is that this rich Hollywood star is calling Memphis collect and making them have to pay for the phone call.
So then we get to chapter 14, which is kind of abrupt. We get a video of Kaufman wrestling Jimmy Hart, and actually this Kaufman versus Jimmy Hart match is a lot of fun. I like it.
Well, I believe this is set up by the tag match that comes on later.
It's weird that the DVD sort of swap these two around.
Yeah, but what happens is, and we should just go into that and get into, is that Andy Kaufman and Jimmy Hart are in a Texas Tornado tag match against Jerry Lawler. And during the course of the entire match is, okay, we're going to go attack him on 3, 1, 2, 3, and each time one of the guys would go and the other guy would just stay back so that the guy would get his ass beat. And then they'd come back and, hey, what are you doing? Oh, no, I thought you were going to go. I thought you were going to go.
All right, let's regroup now. All right, this time we're going to do it on 3. 1, 2, 3. And what we kind of see in the video is that Hart is the more valiant of the two, at least initially. And then at the end of the match, he gets fed up with Kaufman being a chicken shit and tosses Kaufman into Lawler for a pile driver.
Yeah,
they give away the pile driver spot.
Which, again, makes Lawler lose the match.
Yep. But they both get pile drivers for their troubles, and the crowd goes home happy because they finally saw that horrible Jimmy Hart and that horrible Andy Kaufman both get pile drivers.
But you know what? As much as I love Kaufman and Hart, together, I really liked this split and the hatred inferred, even though we later find out, spoiler alert, that it's all kind of a work. But I absolutely love Kaufman and Hart getting into. I love, Jimmy Hart's kind of, he's the baby face of the two of them in terms of being heels, because it's like, look, I'm doing everything you told me to. I'm here in the territory working on it. You're just this guy that comes in occasionally. Go back to Hollywood. I liked the dynamic of Kaufman and Hart hating each other.
So we get to Chapter 18, and Kaufman comes out, and he says to Jerry Lawler, he's got a $10,000 bounty on Jerry Lawler, but he's willing to give Jerry Lawler the $10,000 if Jerry will just be a match against Jimmy Hart. He wants to beat Jimmy Hart, and he agrees to wrestle the match. And Lawler agrees that he will wrestle the match if and only if this is the last time that Andy Kaufman ever wrestles. And Andy Kaufman agrees to this and not the $10,000. And that brings us to Chapter 17, where it was a double cross.
Well,
and
it's
Andy
always
Kaufman
a double
comes out
cross.
with Lawler's, yeah, of course. Andy Kaufman comes out with Lawler's crown, and he hands the Assassins the $10,000 check. And then we go to the video, and we see what happened in the video. And what happened is, during the match, Andy Kaufman threw powder into Jerry Lawler's eyes, which allows the Assassins to hit the pile driver on Lawler and beat up on Lawler for a bit before Austin Idol, with a horrible haircut, comes and clears things out. Jeff, 3 minutes on Austin Idol's horrible haircut and how it does not frame his face well at all.
Well, I can go into that, but I will also go into that this angle worked so well that they ran it 2 more times with Jerry Lawler and Eddie Gilbert, and also Jerry Lawler and Bill Dundee. They kept on going back to this, you know what, I'll pay you to be my partner. Oh, no, you keep your check. And then, of course, it's a double cross every time. It's a infamous trope of the Jerry Lawler story in Memphis, is that, you know, a guy that he used to feud with decides to make nice with him and then eventually turns on him again. Austin Idol is amazing. I don't. I mean, to me, there needs to be no brothers. There needs to be more brothers and daddies and jacks in wrestling promos. And Austin Idol covers all of those.
He's Elvis plus Hulk Hogan plus Dusty Rhodes.
Yes, he's an amalgam of every Southern jive talking white guy babyface who's trying to appropriate language,
there's cultural appropriation going on here.
Appropriation of this. But I absolutely love the line, and this is the only line I texted to you about the entire 3 DVDs. 2/3 of the world is covered with water. The other third is covered by Lawler and Austin Idol.
Oh, that's a great line.
I
loved
that line. And eventually Austin Idol also turns on Jerry Lawler and joins the First Family. Because he's in during the, I believe he's in there during the celebration with Lawler Kaufman wearing the crown when they do the entire First Family celebration.
That would make some sense.
I hate the Assassins.
Yeah, the Assassins don't do much of anything for me. They're just 2 big guys.
I've watched them. I've watched a lot of their history. I've watched their Mid-South stuff, which is okay. I don't get it. I got to be honest with you. I understand they're a legendary team. I think Jody Hamilton is... he has a certain menace to him, but if you watch all his stuff at once, you realize he's kind of a one-trick pony. So I guess it's just you shouldn't watch it all at once. Kind of like Ric Flair would always he'd copy his promos from Worldwide to Saturday Night, and you'd see a certain pattern in there, and it kind of ruins the mystique of that sometimes. So maybe it's just you need to space out your work, but man, I can't stand watching the Assassins sometimes because maybe they were in shape at one point, but I've never seen them
They're like
in
2
shape.
bowling balls.
Because I watched them in Crockett around 84 and 85, and they're just kind of lumbering around. And they're just kind of lumbering around here and talking soft and grumbling. And, the gimmick's great. Don't get me wrong. The gimmick is fantastic. 2 guys in masks who are just in it for the money. I'm down with that. But overall, Hall of Fame stuff, no, I'm not down with that.
Yeah, Hall of Fame is certainly not what I saw in this. But this match kind of gets interrupted because Lawler comes out and tosses fire on Andy Kaufman.
Oh, yeah.
And then in Chapter 19, Andy Kaufman says that he is now permanently disfigured and he can't work movies because of Lawler.
Before you do this, because I love this, I want you to go into, because you have a great note here about the Lawler promo after the Assassins kill him.
After the Assassins kill him.
Lawler comes out. Here are your notes. Lawler comes out after and cuts a promo that goes from 3 to 8, and it's great. He rips off the neck brace, and we go to a sizzle reel of Lawler's work.
Yeah, okay, so Lawler comes out, and he's talking, and he's very quiet.
See Kaufman out here with a crown on, first of all, is sickening. Now, I'm sure that Kaufman and Hart and the assassins are in the back somewhere, seen me here with this neck brace on after the pile drivers. Now, I'm sure that they're laughing right now, because you see, this is what Kaufman has wanted to see for over a year now. So Kaufman, you take a good look. I want you to look at it real hard. And Hart, I want to borrow a little statement that you use all the time. It's he who laughs last, laughs best.
And then midway through this promo, he rips off the neck brace.
Because I want to tell you something. I am not a stinking little pencil neck wimp like you and Jimmy Hart and Andy Kaufman. You see, it takes more than a couple of bums like the assassin to put me in the hospital. I want you to roll a little piece of film. Wait a minute, I want to tell you something, Hart.
And then we go to the sizzle reel of Lawler's work, and what Lawler does throughout this is goes beat by beat, and he's doing commentary to all of his legendary matches and goes,
I want you to take a good look at this piece of film. Roll it right now. I want you to take a look at this. There's been a lot of men come through here, brother, and they've done a lot of things to the king. There's been men bigger, as you can see right here, bigger and a lot better than your stinking assassins. And, brother, I've had it all done to me by each and every one of them. They've come from all corners of the world. Terry Funk, Kendo Nagasaki, Crusher Blackwell, Nick Bockwinkel, Handsome Jimmy Valiant breaking bottles over my head, Joe LeDuc throwing me on the table. But let me tell you something, brother. I'm still here. Do you see that? I'm always going to be here. It's going to take more than you, Kaufman, and more than you, Hart, and more than your stinking assassins to do away with the king. Brother, he who laughs last, laughs best. And I promise you, I swear to God, I'm going to have the last laugh on you bums.
I'm like, yes, because we are on point. We are on focus. Now it's about Lawler putting Jimmy Hart down once and for all. I love this promo.
And I'll tell you what really puts it over the top for me in terms of really being a great promo is that ripping off of the neck brace and going, I'm not some pencil neck actor from Hollywood. I'm a professional wrestler. And part of the mystique of professional wrestling, especially in the territory days, was these are guys who are far better athletes than the normal man. And
yes, or even more than that, they're tougher than the normal man. They may not be better, quote-unquote, athletes. These are just tough bastards.
Yes, and the toughness factor of it is what really gets it over for me.
Meanwhile, Andy Kaufman is saying that he's permanently disfigured and he can't work movies anymore. This is actually a good segue back in. Anymore because of Jerry Lawler. And he says that this crossed the line because up till now, everything has been in the ring. But now what Jerry Lawler has done has affected his ability to work professionally. And he wants to wrestle Jerry. He would love to wrestle Jerry Lawler. He'd love to get his hands around Jerry Lawler. That stupid little Jerry Lawler. But he can't because of a signed contract that says he can't wrestle ever again. And he knows that if he breaks that contract, if he did anything that was remotely outside of the contract, Jerry Lawler is the type of person who would sue him. So that nice little, one thing I like about the Kaufman promos is they knew where this story was going, and Kaufman would weave foreshadowing in all the time throughout these promos. So like when things would happen, they would make sense and you'd see the through line.
I you have to be forgiving of the makeup job for the time it was, because they basically just put it's not as bad as the worst.
You mean he's not really burned?
The worst makeup job ever is when they're doing the in their final feud for the NWA before they jump. Arn and Tully are fighting the Midnight Express, and they beat up Bobby Eaton, and Bobby Eaton basically has a blob of like strawberry jam on his face that they're trying to get over as being a wound. Not as bad as that, but it is pretty bad. What I love about this, I love this kind of angle where it's like, you know what? You forced me to promise I'm never going to wrestle again, and then you keep building up to the point where they have to go back on that deal. I love this. I wish they'd do more of that.
You don't want Jerry to get tricked. You know Andy's going to trick Jerry. And what I like, too, is that, Jerry's smart enough to not get tricked a couple of beats along the way here. But eventually, like, the heel's dastardly plan is going to work, at least to some extent. And that's very important to establishing a heel as a legitimate problem, even if they're not a legitimate threat. So we get to chapter 20, and Jim Cornette is super young and is the new vice president of Jimmy Hart's First Family. And I'm very excited for Jim on his promotion.
This is fantastic.
Oh, it's great.
This is
great.
Jim Cornette, I think, has only been in the business like a year or two. I think this is right fresh off of that first Mid-South run for him, where he hasn't gotten the Midnight Express yet. Because they're still
the
here
Midnight
in Memphis.
Express are not even on the same side of the roster at this point.
And
Bobby's on one side, Dennis is doing another thing, and then Stan is still a babyface.
And you see him as such. This is fresh. He is such a natural to the business. This is almost how they introduced him in the WWF when he jumped from NWA and Smoky Mountain. Like, he's in there.
He kind of already outshines Jimmy Hart to a certain extent. Like, or not outshines, but there is literally no continuity drop between Jimmy and Jim Cornette.
He sucks the air out of a room to the point where a guy like Jimmy Hart seems small time compared to Jim Cornette.
Yeah, Cornette's such a powerful talker. The only thing that would have made this angle more fun is if, like, Kaufman and Cornette had gotten to have more right?
Oh, could you imagine those promos if Cornette and Kaufman had been together?
Man.
I think Kaufman would have been like a pig in slop. He'd
be
so happy about
I think
that.
they both would have just been drinking from each other's cup and just sitting under each other's learning trees all day, just absorbing stuff from each other.
Did you have any encounters with Andy Kaufman when he was in Memphis?
Yes, I did. As a matter of fact, not a ton, because at the time that he came in, I was still the ringside photographer. And then when he came back to work and I had started in the business, I was on a few shows with him and got the chance to speak with him for a little while. But a lot of times he was in the big town and I was on the buttermilk run in the podunk town. So I wasn't around him as much as some were. But he was a quiet, soft-spoken, humble guy most of the time, especially around the boys. He loved wrestling and really respected what the guys did and tried to, get wrestlers like Nature Boy Buddy Rogers on Saturday Night Live and Fred Blassie in the videos and different things. And obviously the match with Lawler, he wanted to help the business and wanted to be in a part of the business. And he was a cool guy. I never asked him for his autograph because I don't want to be a mark in the locker room and, him go, who is this guy? But he was one of those guys that you could just talk to. And I remember Lawler said, after the match they had, and after the second time he came in to wrestle women, and before the big match, he actually asked him, "Gosh, do you think I could get paid for this one?" And then, from what I understand, I don't think he ever cashed his check. I think he just wanted it as a souvenir.
Do you think something like that would work now, or is it just too old hat?
Well, no. Well, nothing works now because everybody going into it is smart that we're yanking their crank. In this case, the wrestling fans in Memphis one Saturday morning turned on television, and this network TV star that had been on Saturday Night Live and a recurring role on one of the top-rated comedies on television was all of a sudden telling them that they were a bunch of redneck rubes and that he could beat any woman, in wrestling. And they had no reason to believe that he was putting on airs or that he was working. They thought he legitimately meant it, and they hated him.
And then and then obviously in a bunch of videos that were all taped at the same time as his disfigured promo, we get into the Kaufman offering suggestions and tips to the people of the South.
It's a peace gesture.
This is soap.
Not soap. Jeff, not soap.
Soap.
Not soap. No. Soap. And some of it is blue and some of it is green, but you just take it and you run it under the water. I love Andy. He's such a great heel. We get more of Andy's videos, tips for people of the South. One of the things that's very good on this is it's a lot of paternalistic Andy Kaufman. And this one focuses on teaching Southern women to use razors, which is a great way to trigger Southern men on like any number of different things. You don't like our Southern women? You want to tell us how to live? Another Northerner coming down here and telling us your value? Oh, it's great. Kaufman knows exactly who he's playing.
But on the other hand, he juxtaposes it because he says, you know what? Men, when they grow hair on their face, sometimes we use these, but we look good with hair on our face as opposed to the women. I just went, oh, man. It's such a great... I just love it's a return to the roots of him just trolling women.
Yes, trolling women, trolling the South, and merging all of those plot points to make sure that at all times the Andy Kaufman character is utterly unsympathetic.
Yeah.
There's nothing to latch onto with Andy Kaufman in Memphis wrestling that's remotely likable. That's the whole point, and Kaufman's all in on that. Chapter 22, Jerry Lawler loses the Southern Heavyweight Championship to Jesse Ventura because of a man in a chicken suit. This is like a real quick vignette. The man in the chicken suit, it will later be revealed, is Andy Kaufman.
It was supposed to be Jimmy Hart because I believe one of Hart's men, or even Hart, may have lost. It's another staple of Memphis. Loser must wear a chicken suit. Because he can't tar and feather a guy anymore. So.
Right, I was going to say, because she's tar and feathering it. Yeah. Chicken suit. Ha ha. Yeah? No? Yeah. This is okay now.
And this will prove that he's a coward. I'm down with this. And another
yes. So Lawler comes out in
what in the hell is this?
Oh boy, this is I mean, like, Lawler, not exactly a fashion machine, but this jacket that he is wearing, combined with like a fresh version of the Jerry Lawler haircut, makes Jerry Lawler look like Nerdy Turpleton to the nth degree. I don't know what's going on with this jacket.
It's a weird bowl cut with like a mullet going on at the same time.
The bangs on it. The front bangs are like my favorite part of the haircut.
Oh no, my favorite part is the beard that's trimmed into the shape of a crown.
Yeah, the crown beard. I mean, the crown beard honestly wouldn't be that bad if he had a normal haircut.
Yeah,
but the weirdo like bowl cut mullet, the bullet that he is rocking, boy, it's a lot. And then we get a Jerry promo, and it's fine. He does throw down Andy Kaufman's VHS cassette this week, and he says that he's not going to wrestle if they continue to show the Andy Kaufman tapes, and then says, "We're proud of the South, brother. We love it." And one thing about Jerry, at least throughout this, is whenever he's proud of the South, he's not. It's never a problematic fondness for the South at any point in this feud.
No, and it's weird because I think you and I are planning to do an episode that is problematic on Confederate baby faces.
Sure.
Yeah, it's not a we love the South because of the Civil War. It's just we have a certain amount of pride in family and neighborhood and community, and we're not gonna let some guy who's from another geographical region look down on us.
Yeah, and the way Kaufman is trolling the South on that stuff, it's all subtextual. It's never like, we won the Civil War.
Right.
We won. It's never that. It's much. It's cleverer than that. So we get into chapter 24, and now Jerry Lawler is getting sued by Andy Kaufman for destroying his video because Andy Kaufman paid for time. So, foreshadowing from a couple of chapters ago.
This is great. I love Lawler. Lawler comes out with just the most... he's just gobsmacked. He goes, "You're not going to believe this.
Have you ever seen one of these?
Sued.
This is a deposition." It's a deposition, yes. Or it's just a piece of paper that he holds up to Lance Russell.
Yeah, but the look on Lawler's face and the tone is can you fucking believe this? I loved his delivery on this to Lance, who is just just
and
playing
Lance
this
is
as
a great
straight as can
sounding
be.
post.
Yes.
Yeah, but he plays as straight as can be, but like is a good guy character, a good guy straight man. So he gives that bend in the tree that you need in order for this to land the right way. He's also mildly disgusted, but he still has to kind of play it a little bit straight. We still get an Andy Kaufman video this week because Andy Kaufman paid for time, but he is scolding Jerry about that and how he's paid his good money. And then we go to the phone, and it's Andy Kaufman. And Andy Kaufman is on the phone yelling at Jerry. The connection is not very good, but also Andy is totally yelling like Tony Clifton. Like he's like 1/4 Tony Clifton. He claims that Taxi got canceled because of Jerry Lawler.
I love this because, I mean, there was so much wrong with Taxi going in, and then I guess Taxi gets picked up for another year by NBC before it's canceled outright. But yeah, no, Taxi was downward spiraling because I guess, actually this is the point where Kaufman was sick of doing Taxi because he wanted to do more than just be the weird, wacky talking guy. So he developed this whole Latka Gravis as a guy with multiple personalities. I think
at one point he tries to get Tony Clifton booked on the show.
Yeah, that whole thing where it's like, oh man, Clifton, and then Clifton gets fired from Taxi. Supposedly because
Kaufman
he was just
discovered
too much
the
to deal
joy
with.
of getting kicked out of places and started enjoying getting publicly kicked out of places. One of the anecdotes from the Taxi episode, or not the failed episode with Tony Clifton. So he gets Tony Clifton booked on Taxi as a guest cameo spot. Andy's going to be off this week. Andy shows up as Tony, works entirely as Tony, and keeps kind of pushing the envelope until eventually Tony gets kicked off. Judd Hirsch sort of goes like, I don't know what the fuck's wrong with Andy. I don't know what we're going to do with this, but I can't do this.
Well, everybody was unhappy at that point. I think Kaufman and Conaway had gotten into a fight at the Golden Globes where Conaway had slugged Andy Kaufman and then left Taxi. I think Danza and Mary Lou Henner both thought they were going to go do movies at this point. Everybody thought Danny DeVito was getting too big of a head on his shoulders. And I think Judd Hirsch just wanted to go back and do theater. So I think everybody was literally and I think Christopher Lloyd's the only guy who wasn't unhappy on the show.
Andy Kaufman gets kicked off of the Taxi set as Tony Clifton, and when they finally go to kick Tony off, essentially Tony pitches this giant fit on the set, and then they grab him, and it's just effortless to push him off of the set. He's just throwing his tantrum on the whole way out, but he wants to get kicked off of the set. That was like the whole point of him doing this. Kaufman as a performance artist is really the point of that anecdote.
Yeah, but the point of this promo here is to say that he's been in Hollywood, and of course, who is he going to learn to box from than the greatest fighter of all time, Muhammad Ali? Because of course a man of his Hollywood status could get tips from Muhammad Ali.
At the tail end of this promo, Kaufman
so
is losing his mind. It's so funny.
Yeah.
He's really, really deliciously deluded. He believes that he's learning from Muhammad Ali. And that builds us into chapter 25, where there's going to be...
Now, before you get into that, when he's losing his mind, is he losing his mind, or is he pulling a Muhammad Ali type of promo type thing, where I'm the greatest, I'm going to see you today, I'm going to... he's really kind of trying to...
he's doing a little bit of like Andy Kaufman aping Muhammad Ali a little bit. I like that. But he's like losing his mind, at least in terms of the energy gets ramped up in a serious way at the tail end of this promo. I think that is more what I meant by lose his mind.
And it's basically to tell Jerry Lawler, I was in the chicken suit all along.
Now there's going to be a handicap match that is a combination of wrestling and boxing. I don't know why this isn't around more. Brawl for All 2.0, I'm just saying. Because Andy Kaufman is now a boxer. Brawl for All 3.0. And Kaufman is putting over finally being able to use a closed fist. How wrestling, he always has to use an open-handed slap, but finally he'll get to hit Lawler real good with a closed fist. And Jimmy Hart and Andy Kaufman talk. In this exchange, you kind of again see Jimmy is very good. Jimmy, I would never say anything less than Jimmy is good. It's just there are points where like Jim Cornette shows up and Andy Kaufman shows up that Jimmy does get outclassed at various points. Andy is just a little bit better. And then we get a recap of the chicken suit angle, and at the tail end of that recap by Andy rattles off this line of, and Lawler's gonna get hit with the iron fist of Andy Kaufman. At which point Lawler comes out and Jimmy Hart cuts town. And then Lawler starts cutting a promo on Jimmy Hart, and Andy Kaufman has to listen on the phone.
The best thing about this was how Hart sells this running out of the arena and how the fans are going nuts for this. Because Jimmy Hart, the first time he sees Lawler, he knows I'm a dead man if I stay here for one more second. So he runs full speed out of the studio. It's the sense of dread and selling that sense of dread that you don't really get in WWE when a heel's coming out.
Lio Rush could be very effective at taking some beats from Jimmy Hart here. I actually think, if I could sit Leo down, I'd be like, bro, you need to look at Jimmy Hart. You need to look at Jim Cornette. There's money for you doing what you're doing right now, especially as this little guy who you want to see get his ass kicked. But take a few beats here because, the running. Like, Leo's running. I mean, imagine that with Jimmy Hart's sensibilities on it.
Look, if the first note of when he hears the Braun type of thing, and Lio Rush goes running up the arena steps up until the next level, that would get him over.
He jumps over Bobby Lashley, climbs up Bobby Lashley, and jumps over him to get away from Braun Strowman.
Yes, something like that. Something just amazingly, freakishly athletic to show, okay, I'm not only scared of Braun Strowman, but I'm freakishly athletic as well.
Andy and Jerry have their first freak show match, this combination boxing, wrestling, no tag handicap match. And Andy, during this, gets on the microphone and screams, "I've been training, man! I have been training!" And the pile driver is against the rules in this match, so this gives Jimmy and Andy the best chance that they've got. But Jimmy and Andy, of course, run chicken shit in the ring, and kind of keep doing that until Jimmy Hart eventually goes for the powder. And the first time he goes for the powder, he actually hits Andy Kaufman in the face. I thought that they should have let that breathe a little bit more, but they didn't. They instead chose to just go for a second powder shot. And this time we get Jerry Lawler with the powder, and that allows Andy Kaufman, whose eyes are suddenly fine off of this, and Jimmy Hart to take advantage on Jerry Lawler. And Kaufman is punching Lawler with these awesome shitty punches. Like it's like his wrist is snapping as he is like trying to hurl his arms into Jerry Lawler feebly. It's really, really funny. And eventually Jerry Lawler is able to turn this around, and Jimmy Hart is able to cut off Jerry Lawler from being able to hit the pile driver. And that allows Jimmy Hart to load up Andy Kaufman's fist with a little bit of iron, a fist-like iron, if you will. And then Jimmy Hart and Andy Kaufman are able to get the pin after Andy punches Lawler with the loaded glove. So Andy is able to use the power of the punch. Both of them are doing everything they can to hold down Lawler. It's all they can do, and Lawler gets his shoulder up at 3.1.
No, I love the breakup of the pile driver spot, and I love just all the kind of... they're set pieces for slapstick, but it's still one of those things where everything kind of makes sense within it. It's like, okay, I hit Kaufman with the powder, turns around, Lawler gets the advantage, I break up the pile driver, Lawler comes after me, I get enough time to put the thing in Andy Kaufman's glove, boom, 1, 2, 3. It's so great.
Chapter 27 is the first family victory party. I know you want to talk about this. There is one guy in the audience. It's not Jeff Hawkins, but there is one guy in the audience who is fucking stoked that the first family is on top of the world looking down on creation.
It's a cast of thousands out here.
Yeah, Buddy Landell is sort of stealing the show by gargling champagne.
I think you have Landell. I think you have Austin Idol here at the same time. I may have mistaken Landell for Idol. You have Bobby Eaton. You have the Bruise Brothers. You have Coco Beware, a Sweet Brown Sugar. You have Dennis Condrey. You have Norvell Austin.
Oh, my God. At one point, one of the Bruise Brothers takes off his hat and has the most Southern wrestler forehead of all time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You could tell. But, I mean, it's like, and you have a couple, I think Rick Link is still around as what was his name before?
The missing link. Man Mountain Link.
Man Mountain Link. I think he's still in here somehow. I mean, there's a couple other guys I don't recognize or I may have missed somewhere in there. But it's like, I looked at what are all like 20 heels in Memphis under the First Family banner because they're all. But I love these dopey celebration angles where it's not so obvious that like when Cornette would run this in Mid-South and then later in the end of it, oh, here's the giant birthday cake. Well, his face is going to get put in the cake, and there's nothing wrong with that angle, but I like just having the heels being able to celebrate being garbage people. This is
where the pendulum has to swing in order for us to feel the full swing of the pendulum. So I'm on board with that.
Yeah, and Kaufman in the Crown is just smelling his farts awesome. I mean, he is awesome in this whole thing.
And I love that the heel standing strong chapter happens 27 beats into this story. It would have been easy to go here this early, but once you go to here, everything after this point is a form of releasing the potential energy. So we get a recap of how the First Family has consolidated power, and we go to a video package where a babyface Stan Lane gets sabotaged from getting a cover in his tag team title match by none other than the scurrilous Jim Cornette. It's nice that they were able to patch things over.
Who are they facing here? I forget. It was the Fabulous Ones. Was it the Bruise Brothers or was it Norvell?
I think it is the Bruise Brothers. I think this is the Bruise Brothers winning their titles. The limited camera coverage in this match actually works kind of good because there's all this stuff happening on the outside that distracts you from what's going on the inside, and it's like the camera kind of looks up and it's like, whoa, what the hell happened? And you have Lance hitting the notes on commentary and trying to explain to you at home what we just saw here. That's all that there is to this. Next we get Chapter 28, which is Art Cruz and Plowboy Frazier, no longer the Rebel, de-rebified. Reconstructed, you might say. And he's against Dennis Condrey and Norvell Austin. And we get the first of Andy Kaufman on commentary. I love Andy on commentary. He's great. Delightful. He's so good.
He's great. And, Condrey and Austin, 2/3 of the original Midnight Express with Randy Rose. But, here's why I was getting confused. Because in your next line on your notes here, it says, Dennis is still in pretty good shape. This is actually before he went to the NWA.
No, I know. I mean, when I'm saying still he was like in less good shape later on.
Yeah,
later on he gets a little bit of the the beer drinking gut.
I think he's like 27 here too, so he's one of those guys who just looks 40 for all of his career.
Right. I
love Dennis Condrey. I actually like. I think I like that version of the Midnights more than Stan Lane and Bobby Eaton, but it's a very close call.
I was going to say it's really close. Like you're making me pick between my favorite cats.
Yeah.
I think I'm a Stan Lane guy, but I like them both. I
think I'm a Stan Lane version as well, just because their double team moves were far more vicious with Stan Lane, because he had the Vegematic, which is an awesome move.
And you know what I like about Stan Lane? I like his little karate martial arty type spots that he would work. I mean, it's a little like goofy, but especially in like 1980s wrestling, if you just watch like a whole 1980s wrestling show, Stan Lane would do stuff that you wouldn't see other guys do in the ring.
It's crisp. You'd be going his karate is very crisp, so it puts it over. There's a Young Pistols versus Midnight Express match from a Clash. That's really fantastic. Rob and I watched it, and that's what we know about Stan Lane as well. But next chapter is when we get into wrestling as a time capsule.
Oh boy, is this a lot of fun. So Jerry Lawler comes out with a 100-pound sack of wheat, and he starts talking about a new heel who is appearing in the territory, the Russian Invader. And he says that all the weapons that the Russians are making don't keep the peace around the world. And then he says that there are a lot of things wrong with this country, but a lot more things right about it, which is basically my take on America, but is also a very effective use of the my brother theory of, this is a little bit political, but not too political, Afghan politics. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the concept, it's an adage of me and my brother versus my cousin, my cousins and my brothers versus your family, my family and your family versus their family, our city versus your city. Essentially the idea that, like, you know, we always draw lines and stand behind them, and that is what allows us to unify. So we're taking that model and turning it into a wrestling angle. So however you feel about all of these other heels along the way, this Russian invader is going to be bigger. And yes, we've had our differences with the Rebel. But, you know, hey, at least the Rebel kind of loves America in his own twisted way, even though the Rebel's not a guy anymore. Or maybe I've had a problem with Austin Idol. But Austin Idol's a dickhead, but he's still an American dickhead. So this is a very effective usage of that kind of adage as a political approach. The more cynical take here, which I should definitely note, is that this is xenophobic. At minimum, it's a staunchly anti-relativistic assessment between the United States and Russia. Not inaccurate at that time, but when you're like, your country sucks, buddy, your people are all starving, I mean, that's pretty, you know, patronizing.
Well, what fascinates it to me, because this is an angle that was running in two other organizations at the same time, because in Jim Crockett you had Ivan Koloff in 84 / I believe it's 85, but might have been the end of 84. But Koloff was in the NWA doing the thing with Don Kernodle, and then he later brings in Nikita Koloff and also Barry Darso as Crusher Khrushchev, you know, take over the Kernodle role. And then you had Nikolai Volkov in Mid-South doing this. But the wheat thing brings kind of a different underlying thing to the entire angle, where you're actually bringing in the geopolitical aspect versus just the Cold War aspect of it.
Yeah, and in this case, it kind of plays into the plowing of the fields and the Southerners as a proud agricultural tradition.
Although Jerry Novak is terrible as the Russian invader. Can we say that?
Yeah, I know he's terrible. His Russian accent, it's like horrible. Like this is pretty lame.
He's an old Memphis guy who they go, we'll turn him into a Russian. Go out there and talk funny a bit.
Yeah, and he's just, you know, not big enough. There's a lot of problems with the Russian invader. He's the Colossus of Death 2.0.
But we'll get into the more interesting part of this as a time capsule, I believe in 31. So let's keep going.
Yes. First, we get a match between the Nature Boy, Buddy Landel, and Jerry. And let me just say, people sleep on Buddy, and his career is wildly inconsistent. You know, you get different chapters that are really good, different chapters of his that are, you know, less than good. But, man, at his peak, Buddy was legit. Of course, the knock on Buddy is that he couldn't keep sober and kind of keep himself at peak physical condition. But here, Buddy looks good. He's young. He's in good shape. And we get more of Andy on commentary here. And just, like, along the way here, really good usage of manager characters with this heel stable, because a lot of these heels would be garbage talkers. Landel, not a garbage talker. He actually had quite a few good promos in him, but his promos were kind of inconsistent. And what Jimmy Hart and Andy Kaufman offer is quality control and homogenization.
Landel's a guy who he was a great talker, but he was better when he had somebody to play off of. I think Rick Rude is kind of the same way.
Yeah.
In many ways. Buddy Landel's one of those guys who I had to become a big fan of in retrospect. Because when I saw him growing up, it was in the NWA, and he was the other Nature Boy. And he was building up
he felt like such a carbon copy of Flair.
He was a Flair knockoff. But now that I've gone back and I've watched things like... and also the other time I got to watch him during, you know, my peak fandom was when he was... and it was one of his better runs, was the redemption angle in Smoky Mountain Wrestling.
That promo is actually the one I was thinking of when I wrote that note about his, like, good promos. His redemption angle in Smoky Mountain, that promo is great. Go and watch that.
When he's part of the Cornet Army. But the other really great run of his is in Mid-South, before he jumps over to the NWA, where he ends up and this is going to be racially problematic, kids, so I'm warning you now. He's in a tag team with Butch Reed, and he basically sells Butch Reed to Skandar Akbar for a watch. But Buddy Landel is fantastic in that angle, as problematic as it is in today's, if you're watching with today's mindset. But
I feel like selling somebody for a watch was problematic back in the 1980s.
Yes, it was, but it was wrestling
I'm learning
back
things about
then
your
as
books
opposed
from back
to.
then too.
It was problematic, but it wouldn't have gotten your wrestling show kicked off of television like it would today.
Yeah, oh yeah, certainly. Yeah. So in Chapter 31, the only note I have here is that Jerry Lawler cuts a promo and says that he's going to make that Russian eat wheat, and I think that's all that happens.
I am going to go off a little bit on this because I believe he also brings up a very culturally defining moment in my childhood and also in the 80s, which is why I always view wrestling as a time capsule, and that is the TV show The Day After.
I really don't think either side wants to be the first to use a nuclear device.
It's not a question of who, but where.
East Germany sealed off the borders to West Berlin.
It's not that happy.
Four principal West German access corridors.
It's crazy, but not that crazy.
I don't believe this is happening.
We have a massive attack against the U.S. at this time. ICBMs. Over 300 missiles inbound now.
Either we fired first and they're going to try to hit what's left. But they fired first and we just got our missiles out of the ground in time.
This is not an exercise.
Millisecond takes you beyond imagining, beyond tomorrow, and into the day after.
If you're not aware of this is, I believe it was on ABC. I believe I was in 4th grade at the time that this came on. But this is a story about what happens after global thermonuclear war, because that was still the Cold War back then. This is 1984. Reagan's in office. People who don't like Reagan thinks they're going to bring us to the edge of a global nuclear catastrophe, and
broadly in the media, there is still just a discussion about nuclear war. Yeah, I mean,
you're still having.
It's a point of focus for Reagan's administration.
We were still doing duck and cover drills in elementary school at this time because of, not that, and people make fun of it now, but, it's one of those things where you practiced for what would happen in the event of a nuclear war back in 1984.
And the last major nuclear bomb test was in 1979, too, right? China tested their weapons. So, I mean, these are things that are top of mind, as it's not just Russia and China anymore, or it's not just Russia and America anymore. Now we're seeing other world powers achieving nuclear weapons.
Well, but also, I mean, you'd have, not now, but a couple years later, you'd have Red Dawn. You'd have, there was always the fear of Russia invading the United States, and this show scared the shit out of about half of America. It was one of the most watched shows of the time. I was not allowed to watch it because it was my bedtime, and also because I would probably have nightmares. But Lawler references this and talks about this and says, if you think that's scary, what I'm going to do to him is going to be scary. And I just thought, man, it's such a seminal moment to bring that kind of Cold War fear and pop culture and wrap it all into a wrestling angle at the same time.
Totally.
I remember the next day the kids that watched The Day After just being really... A lot of kids that watched this were psychologically scarred by it. They were.
I mean, it's one of those things. If you actually think about the real implications of what a nuclear war would be, it's pretty scary. And then I mean, the other thing is you look at something like Chernobyl. Chernobyl pretty fucking scary, dude.
That was like 4 years later. Right?
Yeah, I know. That was 4 years. But I'm just saying, like, I mean, it's not an irrational fear, right? Like radiation's scary.
No, there was a lot going on within culture, and especially in education, that made you aware that this was a very real possibility that the Russians would declare war on us.
Chapter 32. Jerry is doing a talk show, and this kind of, again, gets back to what I was saying. The motivation for Jerry Lawler in working with Andy Kaufman is that he wanted to do things like Letterman, and Andy Kaufman offered a vehicle for Jerry to be Jerry the Entertainer.
Let me cut you off here. Let me cut you off real quick, because it's not just Jerry Lawler. This is also Vince McMahon in Tuesday Night Titans wanting to be a talk show host. And this is why on WWE television there's so many stupid talk show segments. Everybody wanted to be a talk show host. They wanted to be the next Johnny Carson at this time for some reason. It's a fantasy of a lot of people to be Johnny Carson, and it just bled into wrestling as a trope.
Yeah, and this Lawler thing is a bit nails on the chalkboard.
Oh, it's terrible.
Yeah, again, useful in terms of insight as to why would Jerry Lawler, the man, not the wrestler, be involved in this. Like, you can kind of see that interplay. But let's get to Chapter 33, the Windmill. The Windmill.
I'm the king.
I love this.
I'm the king of Memphis, Tennessee. I knocked that Lawler out last week.
I knocked him out with a right hook.
And he just does it. He does it so long that the crowd at first boos, they die, and then they boo again because he keeps going. It's so great.
Oh, there's a lot of noodling in this match, and what makes the noodling even better in this match is that it's a timed round thing. So Andy Kaufman just completely pisses away the first 3-minute round by stalling, and gets a 30-second break on the outside after this, where Jimmy Hart is wiping him down and calming him down, getting the sweat off of his face, and then we get into the second round. And in the second round, as Kaufman had been teasing on the promos, and this is great promo work, Kaufman's been working on the windmill. He can do the windmill for hours.
That's right.
Yeah,
it's the Bart Simpson. You remember the Bart Simpson Lisa Simpson fight?
I'm just gonna kick. Yeah, I'm gonna do this. This is awesome. This is straight up slapstick, and I think you totally hit on it. What we see Andy kind of porting into wrestling is slapstick comedy, which is a big part of what he liked, and he's very much bringing this in. He stands in the center of the ring, and he sets up the windmill, and Lance Russell is putting this over on commentary as best he can, but is in so many words saying, this is fucking idiotic, and then eventually Lawler just slowly walks up, and like you would stick your hand up into a slowly moving ceiling fan, he stops the windmill, and then he kicks Andy Kaufman in the gut, and then he hits a suplex, he hits the fist drop, and he gets the pin on Andy Kaufman.
I need to double back for a second. I can't remember when this was. This might have been during the celebration of the first family, but Lance Russell has a very sly, sneaky sense of humor that we don't really appreciate all that much. And I think Kaufman
there's been some appreciation here.
There is, but Kaufman says something demeaning to Lance Russell, and it's my favorite moment in the entire angle, and then Lance Russell just fires back, without missing a beat. At least I'm still working. I just absolutely love. He's talking. It's like they had brought up the cancellation of Taxi earlier. And Kaufman's out here, oh, you do a terrible job, Lance Russell. You're horrible. And then Lance just says nonchalantly, well, at least I'm still working.
There's another beat that we did miss, just to kind of quickly double back. There's a great part where Andy and Jimmy Hart finally reveal that they've been working in cahoots this whole time. And Andy Kaufman starts scolding the television audience that he fooled all of them and that they're all a bunch of marks, and that he has played them like a fiddle, and that he didn't change his tune at all, and that they're all so gullible and so easily duped and everything. And I just really appreciate the layering that Andy Kaufman always puts in.
That and him threatening to sue everybody in Memphis.
Yeah.
When they're backstage, I'm going to sue
and
you.
Making it into a museum of him when Elvis just died 5 years ago, and Andy Kaufman loves Elvis.
Yeah, and everybody's backstage trying to get in at him in the locker room. He goes, I'll sue you, I'll sue you, I'll sue you, I'll sue everybody in the city.
And then there's one person who's cool to him, and he's like, I wish all of you would be more like him. He is very nice, and he's very respectful. This is basically fuck you, you're cool, only 30 years ago.
Next, is something I had forgotten everything about because, everything about the Lawler-Kaufman angle kind of wraps up on, and then Andy Kaufman died. But they never go into any of how his death was used on television. And let me tell you people something. If you were turned off by them using Roman Reigns' leukemia diagnosis as an angle in wrestling, or if you were turned off by them using Magnum's car wreck as an angle in wrestling, we've got a new leader in the clubhouse, kids.
Yeah, I guess the only thing that maybe is like the asterisk is like this is probably exactly what Andy Kaufman would have wanted.
I hate using that. I hate using that as
I know
thing.
I hate
not in
using
your case.
that, but that I feel like that argument definitely holds in this particular case.
Oh, in this case it does. But I was just thinking of like the like when Jim Carrey, and I'll go into this story now because I was on the Universal lot when Man on the Moon was being filmed. And at that time, I was split in time between working in a production office, but also I had to make some money. It was an internship, so I would go be management at the theme park at the same time. And in order to get into character, Jim Carrey would do these elaborate stunts where he'd come into the park and try and piss off guests. Like, he'd dress up in the Gimp outfit from Pulp Fiction, and he'd jump on a tram that was on a tour and start scaring Japanese tourists. He'd dress up as a homeless man, and he'd roll around in the trash, and he'd come into the park, and he'd start cussing out people as if he had just come off the street. And the excuses we'd always get is, well, if Andy were alive today, he'd have... I'm like, I don't like using that as an excuse for being a dick. I really don't.
No, and I agree with that. I think that,
there was a more whimsical nature to Andy Kaufman's trolling than what Carrey's doing right now. And Carrey was just a total tool during the entire thing.
The thing with Andy's trolling is that when he would heal on the general public, it was very rare that he would heal on a specific person.
It would be in a performance setting where he was doing it as a crowd.
Right. And the enemy was the audience. It wasn't an individual in the audience. And so when you would have those one-on-one encounters with him working at Jerry's Deli, right? Like, Andy would try to pretend it wasn't him. That would be, kind of his go-to gimmick. So he wasn't about victimizing you. If anything, it was about putting you off and making you feel like you were victimizing him.
Yeah, it was an extended bit. Aren't you Andy Kaufman? No, that's not me. I'm just a busboy here at Jerry's.
Yeah. So we get to chapter 34 here, and Lance Russell tells us that Andy Kaufman is dying of cancer, and we see the news article. A lot of people, it's worth noting at this point, because Andy Kaufman had been such a performance artist and such a stunt maker, a lot of people didn't believe that Andy Kaufman was really dying of cancer when he came out and said that he was dying of cancer. Jimmy Hart comes out and adds to this by saying that this is very scientific, Jeff, and I'm sure you'll break down the other 4 in a second. There are 5 ways of getting cancer, Jeff. One of them is bruises. And what we know is that the pile driver can cause cancer, Jeff.
A bruise on the brain.
What are the other 4 forms of cancer? How do you get those? Smoking?
I believe smoking, a bad diet.
Bacon grease.
And then probably impure
styrofoam.
Thoughts.
Yeah.
Thoughts, probably.
Impure thoughts. Yeah, tire fires.
But you know what? It's funny because watching this, I also thought back to a couple of the videos when he was doing the tips for Southerners, when he was doing the razor and he was doing the soap. There's a couple times where, and even on the phone, there's a couple times where he coughs.
Yeah,
very
that's
subtly.
Right.
And it's almost like, man, he's sick right now, and he just doesn't know it yet. And you're just almost like,
I think part
man.
of him knew that he was sick. Like, that's the thing is, like, I don't think he knew how sick he was, but I think somewhere down the line he knew exactly how sick he was.
Yeah, but this thing where the pile driver causes cancer, I had never heard. This is the first time I've seen this whole thing, and I let out an audible, oh my God, they did that. I could not believe that they were using this for heat, but of course they'd use this for heat. It's wrestling, stupid.
And when you consider all of the different levels that they were willing to go to with this,
yeah,
and I I don't want to crutch on Andy would have wanted this as a defense of every weird thing that gets done in the name of Andy Kaufman, but I actually think that this is probably something that had Kaufman's blessing. My gut leads me to think that. And then at the end, chapter 35, it's sad. Andy Kaufman is dead, and Lawler kayfabes Kaufman's death.
Oh well.
Yeah, I like it because at least it's consistent with the character. It's like, I don't want to say anything bad about the guy, but you don't go to someone who hates you to get a eulogy.
You know what it reminded me of? You've seen Tombstone, right?
Yeah, but a long time ago.
Well, it's Ike Clanton's in a bar, and Val Kilmer as Doc Holliday is coughing, and he goes, and he has a spell, so they have to go take care of him and take him out. Ike Clanton goes, "What's wrong with him?" He goes, "Lunger." He goes, "Yeah, well, I hope you die." That's all this was. I was like, holy crap, they're not even for a moment, but this is when wrestling was real. So they're not even for a moment going to deny that Jerry Lawler doesn't care that Andy Kaufman's dead.
Because it would be such a disservice to the rest of the kayfabe world that they've spent literally years at this point building up. So that is the end of Andy Kaufman's run in Memphis wrestling and in wrestling generally. And it's a real shame. I would have liked to have seen how the Russian invader thing was going to play out. I have this theory that Andy, if he had stayed alive, probably would have figured out that he could be pro-Russian for a lot of heat and would have started working slightly pro-Russian.
My name's Andy Lennon now, you know.
I've been reading a little bit of Karl Marx. So what I want to do for all of you dumb Memphis people,
he could have
talk
read
about
from the book.
Proletariat. I know you can't say proletariat. I want to talk about it. Yeah, no, I actually could see him doing a lot of
chair in the middle of the ring.
Yep.
Chapter 1.
Yeah.
And just see how long he could go.
Utility value. It's really unfortunate because I think his contributions to wrestling, because they were really contained in this one angle, don't get fully looked at and scrutinized enough. Unfortunately, he didn't get enough time in the business. But the time that he spent in the business, he worked as effectively as anyone.
Well, and the problem is I think a lot of people view it as just performance art.
Yeah,
as opposed to what it really did for wrestling.
Yeah, this is wrestling. This is way more than performance art. It's wrestling, and what he did for wrestling was take what was territorial and make it national. He's going on Letterman, and he's screaming into the camera before they remove him from air, "I've got a match in Memphis." He's going on Fridays, and he's getting kicked off of Fridays. And on the tail end of Fridays, he's like, "Oh, they're going to cut me off now. They're going to cut me off. You need to see what happens to me in Memphis."
It's the hard sell. He was doing the hard sell on a national audience to a national TV audience that would normally not be exposed to professional wrestling. It's it must have done, I don't know if tape sales were the big thing, but I wonder if anybody ever actually, got into a car and drove, because air travel was not as common as it is now, because it's still kind of a thing for 1%ers. But I wonder if anybody actually drove into Memphis to go watch this based on the Letterman stuff.
Any final thoughts here before we go for the wrap?
I learned a lot watching all of this that I thought I knew that I didn't know before, especially the stuff in the later end of this angle, because they really just kind of gloss. Really, when you watch, if you don't do a deep dive of this, what you get is you get the Lawler Letterman promo, and that's about it, and a couple of the women's wrestling stuff, and maybe a Hart Kaufman versus Lawler match, but you don't really get the full.
You get those first 8 to 10 chapters, and you don't get the full,
And you don't realize that this lasted 3 years rather than just like a summer when he was bored.
I want to thank you guys so much for supporting the podcast. Jeff, of course, can be found at Crap Game. That's CRAPGAME 13 on Twitter. I'm at CHRISNOVEM. Wait. I'm at CHRISNOVEMBRINO. I know how to spell my own name, Hawkins. Don't try to get into my head. And the homepage or our home Twitter account is at Shake Them Ropes. My other show is called Don't Worry About the Government, which you can find at don'tworry.tv and on iTunes and Stitcher. That's going to do it for this episode. Until the next one, bye-bye.
Oh, say, can you
dawn's early light, once so proudly we hailed, at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and the bright stars through the